Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
As always, your observations are astute and also kind of out of the box. Things out of the box is the wrong word. It's like you think about things that regular people don't consider, honestly.
This is true. This is absolutely true.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, so today, Skip, we're going to count down our favorite smartphone apps. But before we get to that, I have to tell you about the best scam email that I've ever received. And I mean, some people might call it the best, others may call it the worst. Depends how you define best and worst.
But do you mean the best, like it was, like it caught you, like you fell for it, or the best in that, like it's the dumbest?
No. It was done really, really, really well. This scam. Like I didn't get caught by it, but it was done very well, and I almost got caught. Because normally when I get these scam emails, you can tell there's like a spelling mistake or something, or grammar is wrong or whatever.
Usually it's the link that gives it away. Whatever link they try to make you click on.
Or the return email address is the dead giveaway usually.
Yeah.
But here, this email was from Bell, and the return email address was support@bell.ca, and bell.ca is a legitimate domain. So,
Right.
In fact, when I look at these emails on my phone, I don't know if you notice, when you look at emails on your phone and you get an email from like Bell or Videotron or Canadian Tire or Amazon or whatever, the logo of the company appears on your phone. So that's usually a giveaway that it's legit. And so I first looked at the email on my phone before I looked at it on my computer, and it looked like it was legit. Anyway, the email said that they were giving me a refund of $100 and something. Now, normally the only time Bell sends me an email telling me about a refund is if I recently called to complain that they made a mistake. And normally the refund is, $10, maybe $20, but it's never $100 something. And so I had not recently called Bell, so I was very confused by this email.
Right.
But the bottom of the email, where it has, it says Bell and it has their address and their phone number and everything, was identical to a legitimate Bell email. So I'm like, is this for real? The only thing that caught my eye was that there was a PDF attachment, and normally Bell doesn't send attachments in any of the emails.
That's a giveaway, because those PDFs are like disguised, right? They're usually like some kind of executable file that's going to pop up when you click it.
So I didn't click it. I didn't open it. And I called Bell and I said, I called Bell. I said, hey, can you check my account and tell me if I'm getting a credit of so-and-so? And they said, no. And then I said, well, I got this email from you saying that I am. So can you tell me if this email is legitimate or not? And then they asked, well, who's the email from? And I said, support@bell.ca. And they put me on hold for a bit. They came back and they said, well, that's actually not one of our email addresses, so don't open that email.
Amazing.
So, anyway, I don't know how they were able to duplicate it so well.
Yeah.
But they were. And so, I saved the email because I was so amazed by how good it was done. I saved it.
It's amazing that like people that are trying to scam you out of money, there's so much effort that goes into it. If they could only put that much effort into like something worthwhile, like seriously, like the world could just be such a better place. But there's so much work and effort that goes into like nefarious things. It's incredible.
Right. Well, the reason they keep doing it is because they're actually successful. They might only be successful, 5% of the time, but for them, it's worth it.
I think less. I think 1%.
Right. But it's still worth it for them, right?
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
the problem.
Sure. So that's a public service announcement, Josh.
Sure. We haven't done one in a while, so okay.
It's just a public service announcement.
Public service announcement. Check your emails. Don't click on anything that looks suspicious, people.
Now, I heard that we got a lot of feedback from our last episode about our favorite Montreal Canadiens players.
Mailbag.
Biggest feedback ever.
Wow.
I decided to put the link to our show and like a question about who your favorite player is on my personal Facebook page, not just the show Facebook page. And boy, oh boy, like lots of people gave some comments. So I really want to mention everybody because I love the fact that, you know, we got this kind of feedback. It was exciting. You were tagged in one of the comments, but you don't go on Facebook. So I had to actually text you to tell you, by the way, so-and-so tagged you.
And even though you texted me, I still didn't log on to check who tagged me.
Right. So here's some of the comments. And a lot of them are similar to the players that we had. And some of them went back into a little bit further back than we did, looking back at the more historical players from the 50s and 60s and beyond. So Liana from Montreal said Beliveau, Lafleur, Robinson, Gainey, Nyland, Carbonneau, Naslin, Skrudlin, Muller, Kovalev, Plekanec, Gallagher, and Subban. Jason from Montreal said the entire rosters from 71 through 2021, which is like kind of a crazy comment from him. Ian, who lives in the Charlevoix region in Quebec, said Henry Richard, which is a cool one. Derek, friend of the show here in Montreal, said he's not sure why, but Steve Shutt. Lorne from Montreal said for him it started with Lafleur and Dryden, and then in the 80s it's Mats Naslund and Mike Keane, and then in the 90s Muller, and then more modern is Koivu, and now it's Gallagher and Suzuki. Mark, not Mark from Philadelphia, a different Mark who's in Atlanta, said number 10, which we understand is Guy Lafleur. Jason recommented, the same Jason from Montreal recommented saying he enjoyed the podcast, he listened to it, and he liked the story that I mentioned about, he liked the stories that we talked about, how I met Soure and that shootout goal. He remembers it well. And Gilmore breaking the glass. And the journalist taking a photo of in Koivu's hospital room. Joel, who's in New Jersey, said Rocket Richard, Dryden, Lafleur, Subban, Beliveau, and he also liked Chris Nyland and Keith Acton, which is a cool shout out. Steve, who tagged you about Rick Wamsley, also mentioned Oleg Petrov. Danny, who's in Montreal, said the two Guys, so Lafleur and Carbonneau, but also Serge Savard, Mats Naslund, Chris Nyland, Larry Robinson, Pierre LaRouche, who we talked about off air, Josh, which is interesting. Ken Dryden, Saku Koivu, Benoit Brunet, and Josh Georges. Different Mark, who's here in Montreal, I think as a joke said Red Like Rasico. Richie, an old high school friend who now lives in Chicago, said Corey Perry, but then with a joke, and then because he had scored that night, and then later on recommented saying Claude Lemieux and Stéphane Richer. Brian in Seattle said Guy Lafleur, Patrick Roy. Melissa here in Montreal said Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, Dryden, Koivu, Price. Jeff, who's a mutual friend of ours from here in Montreal. There's a few Jeffs, by the way. So Jeff from Montreal, as a joke, said Normand Baron, who you remember, Josh, was some kind of bodybuilder who they tried to make into a goon.
He was strong.
Yeah. A different Jeff, this time a Jeff from Boston, said Saku Koivu. And then a third Jeff who lives in California said Brian Skrudland. And he said he loved using him in NHL 86 on his computer. And then he also mentioned Gainey, Chelios, Carbonneau, Corson, Lemieux, Craig Ludwig, Sergio Momesso. And then finally, friend of the show, Matt Sanderson, who lives out in British Columbia, who is the host of the Nooks and Crannies podcast, said Scott LaChance. And he gave the explanation saying he's his doppelganger. Apparently they look alike and sort of play alike when he plays ice hockey. So that's all the listener mail, which was a big list, and I'm glad we got through it.
Great. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll throw out the question again about smartphone apps, but I doubt we'll get such a passionate response, because having so many Montreal fans and listeners and friends, obviously hockey is a passion for us here in Montreal.
Right. And so speaking of smartphone apps, so before we get to our lists, I want to tell you the criteria that I used for compiling my list.
Okay.
So first of all, the important thing for me is I like an app if it makes my life easier, if it makes things more convenient for me. So this is the number one criteria that I used for why I selected the apps that I selected.
That's a good criteria. I mean, my other criteria was I stayed away from apps that were simply mobile versions of a website. So, for example, something like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or even a banking app, which really does make your life easier. It's really just the same version of the bank's website, right? And even an app that I go on often, which is Reddit, it's still sort of just a version of their website. So I didn't really consider those. So did you have any honorable mentions before you're 7? Like I had a couple of honorable mentions, which was like Google Photos, the Weather Network, and Flickster, which is like the movie theater finding app. So.
I have 2 honorable mentions. One of them is Google Keep, which is basically like Post-it notes. In fact, every list I compile for this show is done on Google Keep. And
I have Google Keep open right now, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah.
And the other one, the other honorable mention is Overcast, which I use to listen to all my podcasts. It's a very simple app, which is what I like about it, because the podcast app that came with my phone, for some reason, is so complicated when it doesn't need to be. So I use Overcast. The only unfortunate thing about Overcast is that you can only get it on an iPhone. You can't get it on like Samsung, for example.
Right. I'm shocked that Overcast is not in your top 7. I can't even believe that.
Well, I mean, I think that all my top 7 are really good. That's why it barely missed.
Right. I'll just say Overcast did well on my list. I love that app. So
okay. So this is my topic, so I guess I need to go first.
Number 7.
So number 7 on my list is WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp, I consider a very underrated app, and I'll tell you why. It's very similar to just a text message, but what's great about WhatsApp is I use it to communicate with friends and family that don't live in Canada, because anytime I send a text message, if it's outside of Canada, it's going to cost me a fortune. So that's one of the benefits of WhatsApp. Another benefit of it is that I'm part of a couple of groups, and you can be on as many groups as you want to be. And it's just really convenient if you want to send a message to multiple people at the same time, or you want to receive information from the group, then it's just very convenient. And you can see who's in the group, and if you want to opt out of the group, you can, and you want to turn off the notifications if there's too many, you can do that too. And the other great thing about WhatsApp that I should mention is that we use it every weekend when we record our episodes so that we can actually see each other. So
again, we're using it right now. Actually, WhatsApp, we've tested all the video chat apps, and I think it's the most stable for video calls. No?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, WhatsApp's on my list further up. We'll get to my reasons in a sec. So number 7 for me is an app that you don't use. You never touched it. You don't know about it. That is the FIFA 21 companion app by EA Sports.
You're right.
Now, this is the most used app on my phone. I use it daily. And I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it's a way to play the FIFA 21 game without playing it on your console. You don't actually play the games, but you can do a lot of stuff in your ultimate team, like trading players, buying players, selling players, completing weird objectives and stuff. I mean, this doesn't mean anything to you, Josh, but all that to say is that I use that app a lot, so I felt like it needed to be in the list.
It sounds similar to the fantasy baseball app on my phone, which I only use during baseball season, of course.
It's something like that in a sense, but anyways, let's just continue with the list. Otherwise, we're going to go down a EA Sports FIFA rabbit hole.
Number 6.
Okay, so number 6 on my list, this one I'm sure you do not have. It's the Bell 5 TV app, and I know you don't have or subscribe to Bell products, but what I like about this app is I remember, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, who knows, when I used to have a VCR, and if I wasn't at home and I forgot to set the VCR to record something, I was screwed, because back then there was no way of recording it unless someone was home and could do it for you. But also, we didn't have things like on demand, so it's not like you could just go and find a show that you missed and watch it anytime you want. But now with this Bell 5 TV app, it doesn't matter where I am in the world, as long as I have an internet connection. If I forgot to record something, all I got to do is tap a few buttons on my phone and presto, I've got my show recorded. So I love this app.
You're right. I don't have that app, but I have a similar Videotron version. And yeah, it is very handy. I don't use it often, but yeah, it is handy. And I've used it before. We were like, oh, forgot to record something and we're out. Although not this year because we haven't been out, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So number 6 for me is probably one of my most important apps during the pandemic. Of course, we got to eat, Josh, and we don't always want to make food. So Uber Eats is become really important to me and my family. I mean, I have all the 3 major Canadian food delivery apps, which is Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, and DoorDash. I mean, there's others, but Uber Eats is my favorite. I use it the most, and I just like the whole interface of it, the notifications you get, the whole shebang. And because I use it so much, they give me a lot of promos, so I get a lot of discounts. And it's like, and yeah, I mean, Uber Eats is really popular. I mean, some nights, because we can't agree on what kind of food we want, because we have between the 4 of us, no one can ever agree on anything. So there's some nights where we have like dueling Uber Eats, where we order from 2 places and we see who comes first. One time the drivers came like almost at the same time, which was pretty funny.
I think your family is keeping Uber Eats alive. Just your family alone is keeping them in business. And by the way, speaking of your family not agreeing on what to eat, I remember when I was a kid, whatever we were eating is whatever we were all eating. We didn't have a choice.
Yeah, you know what? There's so many times where I tell my wife, I'm like, I don't care. I'm making this. If they don't want to eat it, then. But that, unfortunately, like, we give in a little bit too much, so.
By the way, the other good thing about Uber Eats is Randy, the guy in the commercial. He's our favorite.
Yeah, Randy Watkins, man of delivery.
Let's eat fish tacos, organic brioche bun, kale salad, California roll, miso soup, beautifully nuanced dance of flavor. So that's pretty much what I do. I take the putting food on your plate, off your plate. I'm putting food on your plate. Randy Watkins, man of delivery.
Oh, he hasn't had any new commercials. Maybe there'll be a commercial during the Super Bowl. They should have a Super Bowl commercial for Uber Eats. They should.
Well, if they do, I hope he's wearing a mask.
Oh my God. I can't wait to see.
Number 5.
So number 5 for me, here's another one that you don't have on your phone. It's the Green Pea parking app. And really, this is only for people in Toronto. But basically, if you're driving anywhere in Toronto and you need to park anywhere in Toronto, this app is a must-have, because instead of having to, find change in the glove compartment of your car or pull out your credit card, you basically just have to tap a few buttons on your phone and you can tell the app where you are and how many minutes or hours you want to park, and then you leave. And if you happen to be like at a game or at a movie or at dinner and you don't want to leave and your time is running out, you can just go onto the app and just add more time. It's quite simple and phenomenal. It's just a very convenient app. I love it.
You're right. I don't have that app, but I have the Montreal version. That's like a Parking Montreal app, which works the same way. And actually, that's a good shout, Josh, because definitely deserved an honorable mention on my list. I've used the Montreal parking one many times, and it's super handy, right? Because you never can get a ticket. It even sends you a notification saying your parking's expiring in 10 minutes. Do you want to add more money? So, yeah, brilliant. Number 5 for me is Dropbox. You don't know how much I love Dropbox. Well, I mean, now there's a lot of cloud storage type of services. There's Google Drive and OneDrive, and, every company sort of has their own version. But the first one that I used was Dropbox, and I still think it's the best one because it's the most, it's just the simplest to use. It's the most intuitive, and it just kind of works. It's the least complicated of all of them, right? So that's why I love it. And I mean, I don't use it as much as I used to, because I used to use it for work purposes, even though they told us not to. But now, the company has its own solution. So I don't use it as much as I would like or would need to. So
interesting. We used to use Dropbox when I used to transfer files to you, but now we don't use that anymore. So I didn't realize that you liked it so much.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's just the easiest one of all of them, honestly.
Number 4.
So number 4 for me, here's another, I think, underrated app. It's not new. It's been around for a while, and maybe that's why it's underrated, but it's Google Maps. So anytime you need to find somewhere where you're going, I mean, if you know where you're going, you don't need this. But if you don't know where you're going, or even if you do and you just want to find the quickest way to avoid traffic, Google Maps is phenomenal. I use it. I mean, I haven't used it much this year because I haven't really gone many places this year. But when I used to drive places and I didn't know where I was going, or I wanted the fastest possible route, Google Maps is phenomenal. I love it.
Have you ever used Waze?
I have not used Waze, but I've heard people who love it as well.
Yeah, a lot of people swear by it. And also, since we already did one public service announcement earlier, I'll give you another one for all the listeners. Apple Maps, which comes with your iPhone, is trash. So you should just ignore Apple Maps, delete it if you can, and get Google Maps because it's much better.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Number 4 for me is an app I don't use that much, but when I do, I'm always very happy, and I'm also always amazed at how it works. Like, I don't understand how it works, but it just does. And that's Shazam. And that's the app that when you hear a song on the radio or on TV or whatever, and you don't know who's singing it or you don't know the name of the song, you just take out your phone, you tap Shazam, it listens to the song for you, and then usually within 5 seconds it tells you the artist and the title, which is like absolutely amazing. And now like they added extras to it, you know, if you have Apple Music or Spotify, there's links to open it in your music accounts, and there's lyrics and karaoke style interfaces and stuff like this. So Shazam's awesome because it's fun.
That's cool. It reminds me of another app that you once told me about, and you might be the only person that has this other app on your phone, where if you're watching a sporting event on television, you can point your phone to the television and it will offer you different play-by-play voices, if I recall. And I don't know what the point of that app is, and I don't even know how it works, but it sounds similar to Shazam.
I think it was called TuneIn. I don't know if I have it anymore on my phone. It really saved me for a couple of times when I really needed it. And it worked well, but I still don't understand the point of that app. Like, I don't get how anyone thought it was going to be useful. Like, I still don't understand. I mean, there must be a reason that I'm missing, but for me, it was great because I wanted to go to bed and listen to the rest of like a Monday Night Football game just on the radio, you know? But then when I was trying to go to bed, I couldn't get it anywhere on the radio because I don't have an actual radio. So you got to get it online, and then they all get blocked, right? Because they don't have the rights for streaming. So then I was like, I can't listen to this. So then I found this app. I went downstairs. You point your camera at the TV. It finds what channel it's on, and boom, it gives you the audio track of what's on your TV. So it was like, wow, this is amazing. But like, who else is in this kind of predicament? You know, like it's pretty rare, no?
I thought that maybe if you didn't like the play-by-play people that they were giving you on television, you could choose different voices. I thought maybe that's what the point of it was. But
I think it is possible. Because there's a like a tuning thing on it, like a fine tuning where you could advance it or slow it, like advance it, as many seconds as you want, or rewind it as many seconds as you want to get it exactly where you want it, if there's a delay or whatever the case is. So it is weird. Anyways, we got off topic there.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'm on number 3 then.
Number 3.
This is also, I find, a very underrated app. It's Google Calendar. So I don't know where I would be without Google Calendar. Let me tell you, first of all, so not only does it keep track of all my meetings at work and it notifies me 10 minutes before, but also I use my own personal Google Calendar for my own personal meetings. Like, for example, when are we going to record our podcast? And the beauty of it is when you look at the calendar on your phone, it shows you both calendars in one. So this way I can see, for example, if I have a meeting on a Wednesday at 10, and I also have a dentist appointment on Wednesday at 10, which would be in my personal calendar, I know I have to reschedule one of them, otherwise I'm going to miss one of them. So that's one of the great things about it. But it gets better. It keeps track of, every time the Canadians are playing or every time the Blue Devils are playing, it shows up in my calendar. So I know, I have something to do on Wednesday night because one of my favorite teams is playing. The other thing, it keeps track of all my friends' birthdays so I don't forget a birthday. It's just, yeah, it's brilliant. I find it very underrated, and I could not live without it. And it's obviously number 3 on my list.
So there's a lot of calendar apps out there, but the Google, as usual, Google's like 5 steps ahead of whatever anybody else is usually doing. Like it's they're always ahead of the game. So yeah, it's probably the best calendar app out there. But I love it how this is in your list and how important the calendar is to you. So I'm gonna tell everybody like a sort of typical scenario that happens when we're trying to schedule like our podcast recording. So like Friday night, Josh will text me and he'll say, "What time do you want to record tomorrow?" And then I'll tell him, "Well, I can record really early if you want. So how about 9:00?" So then we agree. And then 2 minutes later, I get a calendar email invitation saying podcast recording 9:00 tomorrow. Perfect. I say yes. And it's on both our calendars. Great, right? Nothing to talk about. But then what happens is, on Saturday morning, one of us is running late. So I'll text Josh saying, "Hey, can we postpone till 9:15 or 9:30?" And then we agree. And then 2 minutes later, I get another calendar invitation for 9:15. It's updated now, right? Just like as if I'm not going to remember, what's happening in 15 minutes. So I didn't understand why really didn't understand why you're such a stickler for the times on the calendar invites. And I asked you, and I'd like you to tell everybody how you answered that question.
So the reason is, first of all, I watch too much television, but I was watching this show last year called Mindhunter, where these FBI detectives go to people's houses and they ask them questions like, well, where were you on the night of the 15th? What were you doing on, Saturday afternoon sort of thing. So obviously I don't expect any FBI detectives to come to my house, but if they did come to my house and they did ask me what I was doing on the night of the 15th, all I would have to do is pull out my phone, go to that date, and I could tell them, well, this is what I was doing. So that's why I do these things.
Let's just leave it right there. So I'm going to go to my number 3, right?
Yes.
My number 3. And that was already on your list, and that's WhatsApp. And you praised WhatsApp, and you talked about, how much you love it. And it's all the stuff you said, it's, for me, it's the ability to be like across platforms, like it's the perfect way to do, because there's other messaging apps, right? Like you can do group chats on iMessage. You can do group chats now. Facebook's trying to really hype up their Facebook Messenger as a messaging app separate from the Facebook platform. And that's fine too. But WhatsApp is great because it's cross-platform. So if you have a friend that's if I'm on an iPhone and my friend is on a Samsung, well, we're on WhatsApp. And that's how I communicate with my friends and colleagues in Europe who are on Samsungs, or even actually my friend Phil is on a Huawei phone, believe it or not. We communicate with WhatsApp every day, and it works perfectly. And like you said, like it's the quality of everything you get in WhatsApp is strong, and also it's tied to your phone number, not tied to like your username and account. So when someone calls you, it shows up almost like a phone call on your phone. That doesn't even know the difference. Right? It's really great.
And by the way, WhatsApp also works on a BlackBerry.
Yeah, if you had, right?
I used to have one.
I remember.
Number 2.
So, before I tell you number 2, I want to ask you a question. Every week before we record, I always ask you, your wife likes to insert herself in our show, even though every time we ask her to be a guest, she says no, but yet she likes to give her 2 cents on whatever topic we have. So I want to ask you, did you talk to your wife about this week's topic? And if so, what did she say?
Okay, so I know why you're asking it here. I know why you're asking me this question at this point in your list. So she said, what's the topic this week? And I said, well, it's our favorite smartphone apps. She's like, how are you going to make a list on smartphone apps? She's like, I only use one app. I'm like, well, you don't only use one app. You send emails, you send texts. There's 2 games that she's highly addicted to that plays nonstop. I'm like, all those are apps. She goes, no, games are not apps, and emails and texts are not apps. I only use one app.
She makes up her own rules a lot of the time.
Right. So the one app she uses is obviously number 2 in your list, and that's the Weather Network.
Yes, the Weather Network is the number 2 app on my list. And I love this app because, for one thing, regardless of where you are, it knows where you are and it knows what the weather is where you are at that moment, which is great. But the other thing, it can tell you the hourly forecast or the daily forecast. You could even go as far, I think, as 14 days ahead if you want. And it's really convenient for someone who likes to play sports outdoors and wants to know what the weather's going to be. So I really do enjoy it. And the other thing I'll mention is, because I know how much your wife loves this app, every time I get a notification about the weather, I just think that that notification is coming from your house because I believe that your wife manages that app.
She should, and that would be her dream. Do you ever go into the section of the Weather Network app called the Weather News?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, that's her favorite part because, she's not really much of a social media person, so she doesn't get news, like, about the world. So, like, her main source of news is, like, the Weather Network Weather News, which is, like, literally, like, news about weather, but sometimes there's like weird stories, about like polar bears jumping in people's pools, or like these, like when you see these kind of stories, right? Like that's what's on the Weather News, or crazy like waves that wash over people's homes and hurricanes and all kinds of stuff like this. So that's her favorite part of it.
Okay, well, there you have it.
Yeah. So number 2, well, you mentioned it. You mentioned Overcast, Josh, in your honorable mentions, but it's number 2 on my list. Obviously I listen to a lot of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I can't stop. And Overcast is by far the best app available for listening to podcasts on the iPhone. It's not available on any other operating system. It's strictly an iPhone app. And the reason why I love this app is it just works. It's simple. It's simple enough and intuitive enough just to do everything you need it to do. Like you said, the podcast app that's made by Apple is so overly complicated and just weird. They try to like add all these little bells and whistles that you don't need. That makes it really complicated to even know what's going on sometimes. But Overcast is just like, I don't want people to think that Overcast is like a simple app. It's not. It's full of crazy features, but it's everything you need in an easy way to use. That's why Overcast is great. And also, I do subscribe to the top podcast called Top 4 with Marco and Tiffany. And Marco is the developer of Overcast. He's the owner of it, and Tiffany's his wife. So
nice. One of my favorite things about the Overcast app is that when you finish listening to an episode, I have mine set to delete 24 hours later. So I don't have to think about deleting it. It automatically gets deleted. But the beautiful thing is, if I want to go back and listen to part of that episode, it doesn't delete immediately. So I still have time to go back and listen to it. So it's great. I really like it.
Number 1.
You're about to give your number 1, and I think I'm sure that our number 1 is the same. Like I think there's no doubt. No,
I think you're right. And I'll say this: when I used to have my first ever smartphone, which was a BlackBerry, I only had one app on that BlackBerry, and it was The Score, because The Score is simply the best app. Now, The Score has advanced in the last few years. It used to just basically tell you the score, which is really all I wanted to know. Now it's got articles and it's got different tabs that you can use. You can sort it by date, you can sort it by sport, or you can sort it by league or whatever you want, which is nice that it has all those things. But really, if they just went back to their original app, which was just the score, I'd be happy with that too. One of the things I really like about it is that I don't actually open the app very much, but I have these automatic alerts to tell me, 15 minutes before the Canadians are playing or 15 minutes before the Blue Devils are playing. It notifies me and tells me, the game's about to start. So if I forgot, well, there's the reminder. And the other good thing about it is when the game is done, if I didn't have a chance to watch, it tells me the final score as soon as the game is done. And there's other notifications that I currently have turned off because I don't want to be notified every time there's a goal scored. But if you want to, you can. Anyway, it's really great. It's a Canadian app, which a lot of people don't know, because I know people in the United States like this app as well. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't realize that the score was actually a channel.
A television channel.
Right? Yeah. And the logo on the app is consistent with how the branding was for the original television channel.
It's one of the few companies that has not changed their logo since their inception, I think.
Right, or variation of it. Anyways, it's still very close. So yeah, I turned off my notifications on the score because I don't like to get a lot of notifications on my phone, but I still selected all my favorite teams. So like when you go to like you pick your league and you go NFL, well, the Philadelphia Eagles are always first no matter what. College basketball, Duke, hockey, Montreal Canadiens are always first and in yellow, right? So it's like that's sort of the way I like it set up. But I mean, sometimes I turn them on if like we were out for dinner at a restaurant and there was a game going on. I would sometimes turn on the notifications for goals, like, and they're, like I said, the same thing about Overcast and WhatsApp. Like they're like in terms of competitors, like there's lots of apps that will give you the scores of games, right? TSN has an app, Sportsnet, ESPN, like Fox Sports News. There's tons of them, but the score is just the best one because it's still like, it in the same way that I said, like Overcast just does what you need it to do. The same thing with the score. It does everything you need it to do in an easy way to like to navigate it and know how to use it.
By the way, another good thing about the score is that if the game you're interested in is televised, it will tell you what channel it's on. So they're not biased towards, TSN or Sportsnet or Fox or NBC or whatever network it's on, they'll tell you. Whereas the other apps that you mentioned will only tell you about their own.
And I was going to ask you about that because they tell you what channel it's on, like the US channel and the Canadian channel.
Of
or
course,
does it
yeah.
know that we're in Canada?
No, it tells you both because they can't assume where you're located. So it tells you both.
Right. Yeah, no, 'cause like for instance, the Celtics Lakers game was on last night and it said ABC and Sportsnet, which was very cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, no, the score is awesome. I love the score.
The Skip and Josh podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter @skipandjosh, and go to facebook.com/skipandjosh to like the show page. To see links mentioned on today's episode, go to skipandjosh.com. And now for some final thoughts from the guys.
Closing thoughts. I mean, I almost was considered asking you if you wanted to record a whole other podcast episode just talking about this one topic, because we could probably go an hour about the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. But let's try to just do a couple minutes about your reaction to this week with the Hall of Fame and no inductees and Curt Schilling and like, how do you feel about it?
So first of all, the fact that there's no inductees, I think is, it's perfect because you'll recall that last year there was no induction ceremony. So the players who were inducted last year, including Larry Walker, never got their ceremony, and they were going to have to share their ceremony with this year's inductees. But now they don't have to share with anybody. So
that's true. I hadn't considered that.
So
that's a good one.
That's one good thing about no inductees. The other thing is, so, I mean, really the only player I think that had a legitimate chance this year was Curt Schilling. Now,
well, I mean, no, there's still Bonds and Clemens.
I know, but Bonds and Clemens I don't think are ever going to get in because of their steroid use.
Right.
So, Curt Schilling never used steroids, but Curt Schilling...
Whoa. I mean, like, I don't think we should just... I don't know how true that is, but anyways.
Okay, well...
I mean, he was a member of the 93 Phillies, and that, to me, the 93 Phillies is the most steroided up team in the history of teams.
Okay, that's fair. So maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he's not public enemy number one.
He was never accused. He's never been in that conversation.
Like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, ever since Curt Schilling's baseball career ended, he has said and done some questionable things. But I mean, if I'm voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame, I'm voting on what the player did on the field during his playing career. Because, you might not like his political views, and that's up to you, but I'm sure there are, 100 players that are currently in the Hall of Fame whose political views you don't like either, but they're in there already.
There's a lot of jerks in the Hall of Fame. Obviously there is. But on the ballot, the Hall of Fame ballot that the writers are instructed, it does instruct them to consider the player's character and off-field stuff. Like that, they are instructed to consider that.
They are instructed, but I find that makes it very it becomes a very gray area then, because it's your opinion on if you thought this person was a good person or not.
Right.
And for some people who are very vocal, you'll know if they were or not. But others who don't say a word, you might think they're the greatest person on earth, but you never actually know anything about them.
That's true. And then, yeah, that's true. So, I mean, I looked at Curt Schilling's stats. I really studied them. I looked at them for like an hour. Looked at all stuff. I looked at, on Baseball Reference, they have a very good thing at the bottom, which is like the most comparable player to him. And the case for him being in the Hall of Fame is really like 50-50, like it's really, really close. So the fact that he had, the fact that he is like this vocal supporter of the insurrection on January 6th. And, he's been fired. He was suspended and fired from ESPN over the last few years for like crazy, really bad racist comments. So, I mean, for me, that probably, if I had to vote, I would probably say no, right? Just because it's so close. So if it is that close, well, then the tiebreaker is his off the field shenanigans. But do you listen still to the Sports Reporters?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Podcast. So their episode on this was great, and this week, and actually some of those guys actually have a vote, right? Like I don't think Mitch Albom
Bob Ryan
still has a vote. But I think Lupica maybe did also, or maybe not. Maybe Bob Ryan was the only one. I don't know. So it's interesting because these are respected journalists, right? These guys know their stuff, and you have Albom and Lupica basically saying like they wouldn't vote for Schilling, and you have Bob Ryan saying he would or he did even, right? So
yes.
I mean, obviously Bob Ryan's a Boston guy, and Schilling's Red Sox part of his career is pretty crucial. So I think that's his bias, so to speak, but. There's no easy answer, but the one thing that Schilling did this week is he asked Major League Baseball, he asked the Hall of Fame to take his name off next year. He doesn't want them to vote on him. He's going to take his chances with the Veterans Committee, right? Mm-hmm. And as silly as that sounds, and as stupid as it sounds, he's trying to make a point that actually is good, because maybe the Hall of Fame needs to reconsider how the voting's done, right? So and Lupica brought it up on their podcast. He's like, how come I have a vote, or how come you have a vote, Bob Ryan? But like, How come Bob Costas doesn't have a vote? Like this is like the most knowledgeable baseball person there is, Actually, he said Bob Costas and
Vin Scully.
He said Vin Scully, yeah. He's like, can you imagine? Like, who knows more about baseball than those two, right? So maybe I mean, nothing's going to change. They're not changing the way it works to get into the Hall of Fame, but it's something that should be considered maybe. So.
Yeah, they should consider changing it. And I don't know, it might change one day, a long time from now. But, with these old organizations, which the Baseball Hall of Fame is, they are very reluctant to change. And it takes them a long time to make changes. And they just think, well, we've done it this way for 100 years, so let's continue doing it this way.
Yeah, well, Baseball Hall of Fame and Major League Baseball are two separate entities, but the thing that they do have in common is their inability to make phase change, because even Major League Baseball is the slowest to make changes, right? The last to look at instant replay, the last to look at so many innovations, right? Like they're so stuck in the mud of like keeping the game the same as it was, when Babe Ruth played, that it's like it's a little bit weird, right? So, yeah.
And by the way, when I was doing some research, because I mentioned Larry Walker's name earlier, and he's going to get to have his own ceremony. I mean, not just him, but his year.
Yeah.
What I didn't know about Larry Walker until just yesterday was that we share the same birthday.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Neither did I.
That's crazy. Good for you. Good for Larry Walker.
Me and Larry Walker and Thomas Tatar and Woody Allen.
Oh, they all share they all share a birthday with a famous podcaster. Good for them.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, now on to, I guess I'm going to tell you my topic for next week. So, the Super Bowl's next week. We didn't talk about football at all today. You texted me earlier in the week. The amount of negative energy and hate that you have for Tom Brady, I think it's unhealthy, Josh. Like, honestly, it shouldn't bother you. It should not bother you so much that he's in the Super Bowl. He just is. What are you going to do? So, I mean, I assume you're cheering for the Chiefs. Is that correct?
100% I'm cheering for the Chiefs. And can I tell you something? We are smack dab in the middle of the 2 worst weeks of the year, because the 2 weeks between the conference championship and the Super Bowl are the most annoying 2 weeks of the year, because all you hear about is this game over and over and over again. And this is one time where I'm thrilled that I don't have any of these sports channels, because I haven't heard much.
It's going to be weird this year because there's not, that media, like the whole media week, like they're not really going to have that, right?
Good, because I don't want to have that. I don't need that. It's just annoying.
And not like anybody cared, but the Pro Bowl is not, there's no Pro Bowl. Not that anybody watched it anyways.
There's a 2-hour television program on today about the Pro Bowl. I don't know what they're going to do for 2 hours.
I didn't even know that. That's so bizarre.
I've been seeing commercials for this show for the last few weeks, but there's not even a game.
Oh, that's bizarre. So, okay, are you ready for the topic for next week, or do you have anything else you want to throw in before we close the show?
I just want to say, that I don't want to hear anything about that quarterback that plays on that team called the Buccaneers. And yet, on Monday, you of all people sends me a text message telling me about his age and the age of Pat Mahomes and the age of Pat Mahomes' dad. Like, I don't want to hear anything. And you're helping fuel the fire.
Actually, this week, the big topic, I think it was on one of the ESPN talk shows. And then it was a question on Twitter. I think they were talking about, like, is this the greatest quarterback matchup in the history of the Super Bowl, Brady versus Mahomes? And I was like, they were all in agreement. Yes, it is. All these guys on ESPN were like, yes, it is. And I was like, hello? Montana Elway? Montana Marino? Like, I'm sorry. Those are better matchups than Brady Mahomes. I'm sorry. It is, So,
I mean, certainly, because if you're talking about Mahomes now versus Brady 20 years ago or 15 years ago, that's a different story, but not Brady now. Like, Brady had almost very little Brady had very little with them getting to the Super Bowl. It was mostly the Tampa Bay defense.
Yeah, and the Packers defense.
Right.
The Packers defense completely forgot what to do with the last play of the half, and then that was the game, right?
And by the way, how many times have I told you that it bothers me so much when a coach will take a knee with 30 seconds left in the first half and just let the clock run out? You have plenty of time to run a play. Throw it downfield. What's the worst that happens? It's incomplete and the half is over.
Or the best thing that happens, which was what Bruce Arians did. He told Brady, give it a shot if it's there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So in the spirit of all this football talk, next week and the Super Bowl next week, we're going to count down our favorite NFL quarterbacks.
Okay, I can do that.
I don't even know if you have 7.
I might not, but I'll dig through the list because there's enough.
I mean, there's plenty of quarterbacks. It's a question, do you like them or not? So, yeah. So, that's it. That's the show. Good show, Josh.
That's today's episode. That's this week's episode. And I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Bye.